Hi there, it's Ian McTavish with Hoya Robotics, Team 4152, and this is tutorial 4 of our Techno Girls MiniBot project. And we're basically going through all the steps to create a mini robot. For step 4, we're designing gussets. I really want to thank all of our sponsors. This is what makes our team thrive, and really appreciate all of their support. So we are working on gussets, and basically the goal with the gussets is that we are going to be taking square tubing and connecting it. So we've got our piece of square tubing right here. Sorry, that I tried to do that earlier and that popped up. So here's our square tubing. Later on, we're going to add a gusset to it so that we can attach another piece of square tubing. So that's what we're going to design right now. And what we're going to do is that the square tubing is going to go on the top. So we're going to select the top and we are going to click the sketch. So this allows us to sketch right on the top of the square tubing, just like we've done before. So I'm in the sketch. I'm going to click End to normalize my view. And now that we're normalized, what we're going to do is we're going to draw a rectangle. And so over here is the rectangle tool. And we're going to hold our mouse over the corner and we're going to click once, and that starts our rectangle. And what I'm doing, I always like to not get constrained. So I'm just going to click over here where it's not orange, and that allows me to type in the length, and our square tubing is 1 inch. And what we're going to do is that this particular piece is going to be 1.25 inches. So that gives us a rectangle that's going to cover at least 2 holes, which is going to be useful. Now, if I zoom in, I'm just going to turn off the rectangle tool. If I zoom in, there's my holes. What I can do is right-click and use. And this is a really handy thing that I can use elements that are on a different sketch, but that line up with this. And just like that, I've made the 2 holes for my gusset. Everything is going to fit nicely, which is great. So I'm going to add a second rectangle. So this rectangle, I'm starting at this corner point. So I'm going to click once, move my mouse, and click a second time. And this time I'm going to do 1.25 for that length, and then 1 inch for this length. So this is going to give me an L bracket, and part of the L will cover this side, part of the L will cover the square tubing that's going to go right over there. So that's really handy, and I'm going to change my sketch name from sketch 1. Whoops, I accidentally closed it, so I'm just going to right click and rename and call that L gusset. So that is my piece of square tubing. And what I'm going to do now is I am going to extrude that square tubing. So with the extrude button, if I select sketch L gusset and click extrude, that should extrude my square tubing. The default 1 inch is a little bit big for what I'm doing, so I'm going to set that to 0.25, and I'm going to select new. And that's really important because I don't want it as part of my square tubing. I want it as a separate part. So it's new. I'm going to change the name. Now, the reason I picked 0.25 is I happen to have some 1/4 inch Lexan that we're going to use to actually manufacture this. And there's different ways you can do it, but you want to think about what materials you have to build things with. So there's my part. You can see there's 2 holes. I do want to explain, I will be adding holes in a later tutorial here, but I'm purposely holding off because I want to explain a few things. Now, that's the part, and I'm just going to right click and I'm going to change the properties for this particular part. As I've mentioned, we always name things, so L gusset is a nice, easy to remember name. And with our part numbers, I'm going to use my same part numbering convention. So TG, I always have 2 to 4 characters that represent either my initials if I'm creating a thing or if it's part of a group. So Techno Girls is the group, so TG. MB, because that represents the particular project. So our competition robots are always 4152 for the team, and then this year is 20 because it's 2020 to represent that it's the robot for the 2020 season. The next thing is P because it's a part, and 01 because it's part of the first assembly that we're going to create, and then 02 because this is the second part that I've created. And I do find I just keep little notes for myself as I'm creating things to keep track of which part I'm at. I'm going to right click and assign the material now. And as I mentioned, I've got some Lexan. Well, Lexan is actually the brand name, and this is actually called polycarbonate. If I just search for POLY, there is polycarbonate. And I love working with polycarbonate because it's very strong. Bulletproof glass is made out of it, but it's also really easy to work with. And so it's a material that I like making things out of. So that's my L gusset. And as I mentioned, it's not totally finished. We're going to finish it in another tutorial, but I wanted to make sure that we got the basic shape and we got the holes so that we can attach the first piece of square tubing to it. Now, I'm going to create a second piece, and this is going to be a T bracket. So basically, I'm going to have my square tubing and a piece of square tubing here, and then I'm going to have another piece of square tubing here. So same thing, I'm going to click the top of the tubing and create a sketch, and the rectangle, and I better click N so I can normalize my view. And I'm just going to click on the side here and drag down and click so it's 1 inch. And the T tubing is going to be a little bit longer. It's going to be 2.5 inches. And what I want to do is that's popped up and gone up here, which is a bit higher than I want. So I'm going to set the dimension for this. And what I'm going to do is this. So what I've done is click the dimension tool, click the top of my T and the top of my L bracket. So this is 1.25 inches. So that's going to be basically 2.25 inches. So I'm just going to type 2.25. And this is positioned it quite nicely, so it's not, it's midway between two circles, and I've got 5 circles on my T. So that's my first part. My second part is going to be creating the other part of the T. So I'm just going to click here and click and drag, and 1.25 for that length, and 1 for the height of this. And this particular part, I'm going to click the dimension tool, click the top of that and the top of that, and this is going to be 0.75 inches down. And I have the advantage, I sat down and did the math here, but I know that these are all 0.5 inches, and this allows me to line up the circles when I put in the square tubing. So I'm going to save my sketch, name it T Gusset, green check mark. I think Gusset might have 2 T's, so I will fix that later on. And I just realized I need to go back in there because I didn't use the holes. So I just need to quickly go in here, right click each hole. So I went into the sketch, and there's all my holes. Green check mark, extrude, select the sketch that I'm extruding. Again, it's 0.25 inches, and it's going to be a new part. And it's extrude T Gusset, so I can find this again. And so I'll need to go through and fix that. And again, I need to set my properties. Techno Girls, MiniBot part 01, and then this is going to be 03. And I can right click and assign my material. And again, I'm going to use polycarbonate for this particular piece. And just so that you know, you can also change the color as well. I'm not going to worry about that right at this point. So that's the end of this tutorial, and thank you very much for watching.